There's a strange light that's reflecting. I don't know.
It's your shame.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi Emma. Hi Zukiswa. Hi James. Welcome everyone. Welcome. Hi Frankie. Hello. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join in. Don't be cheeky, Mr. Native. Hello. Okay, I have no idea what Zukiso and Tolu are talking about. Oh, Ashley is here. So I think we can start. Okay. Welcome everyone to the 5th season of Afrolit and Frontières. Today I'm joined by Ashley Hickson-Lovence. I'm just going to read his bio. Ashley Hickson-Lovence is a writer from Hackney, London. While working as a secondary school English teacher, he completed his MA in creative writing and publishing from City, University of London, part-time, and is currently completing his PhD in creative and critical writing at the University of East Anglia. His writing has been shortlisted for Penguin Random House's Right Now 2018 program, and he was also a runner-up for the Jericho Marjak bursary for underrepresented writers in 2018. His debut novel, The 392, set almost entirely on a London bus, is released. It's already out, so this seems to be an old bio. Yeah, so I'm just going to add Ashley so that we can start the session. And before this ends, I need all of you to go on Amazon and just get Ashley's book. Hi, Ashley.
Hello, Troy. How you doing, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. You?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm good.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us for season 5 of Afrolit and Frontiers. Perhaps we can just start by you telling us about yourself. You know, I've already read out your bio, so you can just freestyle it, and then you can do a bit of a reading from your novel, which I was just telling everyone to, get from wherever.
Nice one. Yeah, you've been so supportive of the book. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I know you've just read a bio, which I think was a little bit outdated, but there's not too much to change from that. Yeah, I'm in my late 20s now, but I've been writing properly for perhaps maybe the last 6-7 years. 392 came out in 2019, my debut as a hardback, and then came out on paperback earlier this year, which I saw you at the paperback launch. It came out with Own It. Now, Own It are a very brilliant independent press based in Hackney, East London. And they took a punt on me and published the novel, and yeah, it's been good. And I'm just finishing off my second novel. I obviously can't say too much right now, but news to follow, definitely.
All right. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to your second novel. I really loved the 392. I think I've bought like 4 different copies of it. Now I have it on Kindle because I left all my books in the UK, so I didn't carry any of my books. So
Oh
yeah,
man, you're
yeah, I had
putting
to get it again on Kindle.
no, a lot of respect for that. Definitely, a lot of respect for that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it means so much, especially because not only are you supporting sort of my journey as a, you know, as a fledgling author, but also, like I said, my independent press who are so good and so
Yeah.
supportive of what's happening in British literature.
All right. So do you mind just reading a bit from the novel so that we can start the conversation then?
Absolutely, yeah. Shall I read the boxer part like we talked about before, you think?
No, just read the part that you meant to read, and then we can halfway through the session you can read
Gotcha.
the boxer part.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to read a very small bit, maybe 2-3 minutes max, from near the end of the novel. I have to be very careful because I don't want to give too much away. There's, you know, spoiler alert, but not this is not the case for the bit I'm going to read right now. The very last chapter is told from the perspective of a police officer. And it's the only sort of chapter in this whole book that actually isn't on the bus. So yes, and this is quite a sort of frantic bit as the police officer is approaching the scene and she knows something hasn't gone well. This is the first time I'm reading this bit in such an environment. But there's a bit about London. There's a few lines about London which I think epitomise one of the key reasons why I decided to write this book. But let's see if you get it. I still get that buzz, you know. When a good call comes through and the blue lights go on, your body sort of shivers into action. All your senses are sharpened and a button inside you is suddenly switched on because your brain knows something has happened and you got to do something about it. The adrenaline is released and you got to react. I can't really explain it. All I know is I love the thrill of it. There's something about this city. It's always bubbling under the surface, threatening to boil over without ever actually happening. There's just enough bodies, just enough police officers or doctors or teachers or whatever to stop something really, really bad from spilling out of control. And that is London life. Always on the edge. You're always just around the corner from something exciting or something criminal or something beautiful. It's chocker. Traffic is building up already. Going towards Highbury Corner. There are buses all in the bus lane not moving. Some drivers are out of their vehicles trying to see what's causing the hold-up. We speed down the other side of the road. We're doing 45 past Zia Lucia and N7 Vagabond and the Barn and the House of Hamilton and Bird and Jackknife. All of these shops that didn't exist half a decade ago. Tesco to the right, Little Waitrose to the left, a Majestic. As we get closer, it's obvious that this is a bad one. There's worry on people's faces. There's a cluster of people outside the magistrate's court, all wet and huddled together on their phones. People in high-vis and people in suits and photographers, like they're waiting for the arrival of something that doesn't look like coming anytime soon. Chris sweeps in between the stationary cars. The steering wheel is spinning left and spinning right. His face is all pink and sweaty. It's completely gridlock up ahead. More roadworks on Highbury Corner again. We edge forward, squeeze in between a double-decker 43 bus and a white delivery van. Chris honks the horn and I wind down the window and yell at a Prius to get out of the way. I can't see beyond the traffic yet, but I can sense something very wrong. I look at Chris and even he, who has seen it all down the years, looks worried. With some quick thinking, he mounts the pavement, weaves in between the roadworks and the scanser signs, and wiggles free. It's not an ideal move, but this is a critical situation. We overtake a few stationary cars and climb down from the curb with a hefty bump. We're the first unit here, it seems, as we screech to a stop. My eyes can't quite take in the scale of the scene as we pull up.
Thank you so much for that excerpt. I think one of the things I like about the part that you just read is, in as much as the 392 it's so uniquely London, but also at the same time, that could be any city. And I think Cynthia Jella just says it reads like Joburg life, always on the edge of something. So I really like that you're able to capture something that's so uniquely London, but also it could be Nairobi, it could be Lagos, it could be Johannesburg, it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I wanted to, and I've been curious about this since I got a copy of your book, because the blurb says it's set over 36 minutes, and I was like, whoa, how do you set a whole novel over 36 minutes? So I just wanted to know, was this a time that you set out in your mind, you know, I'm going to write a novel that takes place over 36 minutes, or that's just something that happened as a coincidence?
Yeah, I think it's always in the back of my mind. I like my reading experiences to be pacey and bubbly and quick, because London are all of those things, and not just London. Cities, major cities, urbanized cities are all of those things. And I wanted the actual size of the book to mirror the pace of living in a city like London, living in a metropolis like major big cities across the world. And I wanted it to be a very condensed, terse, pithy experience, because sometimes when you live in a big city such as London or any sort of metropolis around the world, you experience things in a very fleeting way. You experience joy, happiness, fear. All comes and goes very quickly. So yes, I always had this idea that I wanted it to be quite quick and just a single commute. Because actually, in any sort of journey, we have bus journey, tube journey, train journey, car journey. So much actually happens. And if we had to actually detail that, there would be so many different stories about who we're sitting next to, who we're looking at, who's making the noise at the front, who's making the noise at the back. So I think, yeah, this is just a single journey, but it could have been many journeys that I took on my way to work, which is how I wrote this book. You know, I wrote much of this book on my way to work, sometimes on the bus, often on the train. I really wanted to capture those nuances of those passengers, the rich, the poor, the young, the old, because I was sitting next to them and I didn't know anything about them. And I was really fascinated by that.
Okay. I think more than a novel, the 392 for me was a character study. I kind of just seeing you move from one character to the next, and, you know, just being able to create them in a way that they felt real and they didn't feel like you were just breezing through them. And I kind of wondered how much of this was influenced by like real life, and how were you able to just say, oh, I'm going to, I think there was, for example, a description of a character which just leapt out at me when I was reading it. And I just wanted to know, for a novel that takes place in a very short time and has many characters, how are you able to achieve that distinction between all of them?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think it's a very good question, a very good argument as to whether it can be successful. And I think that's a very subjective way of looking at it in many ways. If success is what the 392 is perceived to be when you're looking at something like that particular technique. For me, it was a very sort of quick, fleeting snapshot of people's lives in a particular city. This isn't a very forensic blow-by-blow characterization of every single character. And that's not my ambition. I didn't want to give you sort of this rambling backstory of every single character. This is them living in a particular moment. This is them experiencing London life or sort of big city life. Because like you said before, I think there are similarities between big cities such as London and others across the world. This was just a fleeting snapshot of their life at that particular moment amidst this rise of gentrification. So like emergence of coffee shops and bike shops and theatres and also the threat of terrorism, because when I wrote this, quite a few terrorist attacks happened around that time, sort of the London Bridge attacks, the Manchester Arena attacks. And I was a teacher at the time, and I had to tell my class, because they were generally quite scared and worried. They were worried about two things. They were worried about, obviously, the threat of death, but they were worried about how being a person of colour, like the students I taught, are going to be perceived in a society where if you are othered or you are brown, you are a threat or you are something to be feared. So, yeah, there was a lot going on. I was grappling with a lot, but I still wanted to try and keep the chapters really short, and I was very strict with myself. I could have carried on, especially with some characters who I think we've talked about this before, but like Boxer and also Natalie's characters, I loved writing them, and I could have carried on and on and on, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be quite strict with myself because I wanted everybody to have a sort of similar space, a similar platform to vent their frustrations with gentrifications or their frustrations with prejudice or racism, like you see with the characters in the 392. Like I said, you hear from black, white, young, old, bus driver, businessman, and yeah, that's how I saw it. Sort of different opinions and perceptions of the world at that time, which is around a few years ago, really, from different points of view, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's also one fascinating thing about the novel is you could have chosen to write it in third person, and it would have still been able to capture the urgency, and it would have still been able to. But there's something so original in it being in first person, and the fact that you're able to achieve the transitions and still keep the distinction. I that's what I'm trying to understand. What was the research process like? For example, moving from Boxer to Gloria, or from Stu to like Natalie, like these are completely different characters. How are you able to switch as a writer in your mind and say, this is how I want to capture a 16-year-old talking, and this is how I want to capture 60-plus-year-old woman talking? How are you able to do that?
Yeah. I would say there's a bit of everything. It's a bit of personal preference. I've always preferred writing in first person. I feel that's where my strengths lie, because I can really, there's real heart there for me, and I feel like I'm really venting, and I feel like I'm really sort of in a very holistic way. It's quite cathartic for me writing in first person. We alluded to it before about how are these characters and to what extent are these characters based on real life. And I would say, like most, well, not most, but like some debut novels, it is quite autobiographical in places. The character of Gloria, she's an retired Irish nurse. My grandmother on my dad's side, my dad was mixed race and his mum was Irish, and she passed away a few years ago, and it was almost like I had to write about her. I had to include this in my book. She's also in my acknowledgements, because obviously she was such a key figure for me growing up. The younger characters, I have to say, were heavily influenced by real students I taught. I was an English teacher in secondary schools across London, and I can't deny that a lot of them, I would just listen to what my students were saying in class, and because they were so, they so openly and candidly critiqued the society that they were living, whether that were politically, whether that be sort of about terrorism or society. This was just gold dust right in front of me, material right in front of me. So there are elements of the characters in the 392 which are written in first person that are autobiographical. Sometimes I studied characters and students that I taught. Like I said, my grandmother's in there a little bit as well. But I wanted to try and make every single character as different as possible, because it's very important when you're writing a book which contains 11 characters in such a short novel. I mean, this novel is about 45,000 words. It needed to be it needs to be as distinguishable as possible. So what they say and how they say it is very different as it goes on.
And then something else I wanted to ask about was, for a novel that's very short, so many characters, you're trying to move everything so fast. It kind of reminded me, there's this scene in Teju Cole's Every Day is for the Thief, where this person is riding on the bus and they see someone reading their favorite book, and they want to kind of nudge them and tell them, oh, that's my favorite book. But then the other person gets off the bus before they're able to talk to them. And I felt like that is how it feels to read the 392, where you're just starting to get to know a character, and then suddenly it's done. So weren't you worried about the readers, wanting to spend more time, for example, with a character, and just not having this feeling of their favorite character just being yanked away from them in that sort of way of a bus where someone just gets off before you can have a conversation with them?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think I'm glad you got that reaction, because that's exactly what I was going for, which is really good. I really wanted you to, because when you travel around London or any big city, you look at someone and go, oh, they look cool. I wonder what their story is. Or then sometimes you even fall in love for a second, don't you? You go, oh my God, look at that. She's beautiful, or he's beautiful, whatever it is. And you think, and then they go, they go to the next stop, or they move on, or they get off the bus, or they get off at the next station. And then that feeling of affection or that feeling of hatred comes and goes just like that. And that is exactly what I was trying to convey in such a novel, where you don't get this in-depth backstory of these characters, because you don't get that when you're traveling on the bus. All you get is this sort of superficial aesthetic of what they look like, what they smell like, sometimes good and sometimes bad. Like there's a character on the 392 who smells terribly. So yeah, no, that's very good. I'm really happy that you felt that, because I wanted you to be sort of a little bit like bereft, a little bit frustrated, a bit like, oh, I wish I knew more. But then but then it's easier to sort of form a perception about them because you don't have this sort of elongated backstory.
Okay, I think now would be a good time to read from Boxer's perspective, and then we can come, when we come back, I'll read all these. I can tell you, I can just warn you right away, the comment section is so thirsty. Just read, just read, and then we'll get back to that.
Is it not quite Sunday content? I'm going to, I'll read from Boxer, if I can find it. My bookmark is just a bit of tissue, because I'm not even at home. I'm in Wales at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm away for the... Okay. So Boxer is a teenage boy. He's on this bus. He's sitting at the very back of the bus, and people who, grew up in big cities and traveled on buses, if you sit at the back of the bus, you're trying to be cool. You're trying to be like, I own this bus. Like, so he's giving it the big one. He's on the phone to his friend, and he's trying to speak all sort of London slang, colloquial, but actually inside he feels very uncomfortable about speaking this particular East London dialect, shall we say. So yeah, here we are. Oi, cuzzy, what's going on? You heard? Big news, bro. My brother got his ting pregnant. Yeah, fam, it's mad, proper mad. Mumsy's mad vex, says she's going to send him back home. She's saying I'm the last hope in the family now. Me, it's a joke ting. I know, fam, your world can just change just like that. It's mad. Blacks was like, maybe we can pass around her mum's and stomp on her belly. Yeah, trust, it's deep. He's pissed though, because she says she's keeping it. The mum, she's had a rep since year 7. You remember that sket from Ends, fam? Nah, not Lashanti, bro. Nah, that's Brianna. That one lighty that used to live in Coville with those nice breasts. That Natalie chick. Yeah, her. This is actually serious. It's a human baby we're talking about. I don't think she's really a sket either, but once you have a reputation in the ends, no matter how unreliable the source, it's hard to get rid of it. It's mad though. Never thought the situation would end up like this. I swear, this bus is so wavy, man. Can't even go in a straight line. Gonna be bare late for school. Fam, it's going around all the ends in some mad directions. I should have just got the 271 still. It's bare bumpy too. What? Yeah, proper busy. It's actually a proper shiny new bus as well. Not even got dirty chicken boxes underneath the seats yet, or like Sharpie graffiti. It's just got them posh man on it. Seriously though, what's the ends coming to? It ain't what it used to be. Yeah, I'm basically in Dalston now. Yeah, I'm jamming at the back, innit? I lower my voice nearly to a whisper. There's a man on here. I think he's that politician, bruh. Swear I've seen him on TV before. You know that one that doesn't rate black people or immigrants? You know that guy with that proper yellow hair that's always mad messy? Yeah, him. I think that's why there's a camera crew on here setting up, innit? Allow getting baited out on TV, man. Don't even have a bally on me like Unknown T. Not feeling being on London news today. Although saying that, being on TV might be kind of nice, to be honest. Might even get a nice girl if I get exposed and they see me looking all peng. For God's sake, I hate buses. This one is so small, it's like a flipping van or something. I swear my aunt's whip is bigger than this titchy ting. I feel like my personal space is being violated. Driver looks like a proper auntie too. She's got gold earrings and one of them colourful head wrap scarves, like she's going to church for a wedding or something. Not gonna lie though, free travel is blessed still. Do you remember them days on them long 149 buses jumping on with Fleeks and Chucky and them lot? We used to just jam at the back, bussing jokes and playing music out loud on our phones. We used to slip into other ends as well, but no one would ever try a ting on us because we had a mad rep them times. We used to go all the way to Edmonton Green for no reason. Do you remember? we used to proper violate that free travel and then jump off when we saw the inspector because none of us used to carry our oysters with us anyway. I remember causing so much stress for members of the public for no reason. I actually always hated it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, so now I'm going to read the questions from the comments. Our first question is from this person called Dr. Ndlovu. No one knows if she's a doctor. Like, she might be a witch doctor. She might just, you know, she's asking.
As long as you own it. Own it. I think just own it. Own the title.
Is our guest author single and available? Asking for a friend. I think she's just asking for herself, but, you know.
I'm afraid not. I'm a taken man.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate it, doctor, and all the love.
Yeah, don't worry about her. She's been hitting on every person since this festival.
Oh, what? I thought I was special. I'm a bit gutted.
Nah.
All right, okay.
Remy the Troll is talking about multidisciplinary artist spectacles. I don't know what this person is talking about. But he lives in Namibia, so probably the heat got into his head.
It happens. I wish he had some of the heat here. I'm in very cold Wales, actually. So
okay. So I can't seem to find any meaningful questions because all these people are doing in here is tossed around. Okay, so there is Remy again. Oh God. So recently in an interview, Bernardine Evaristo said she goes for 8 rounds of sex.
Oh yes, I saw that in The Guardian. Yes.
Yeah, and so Remy wants to know, I don't know why he's so invested in this. Remy wants to know, so how many rounds does Homeboy get in a day?
Wow, that's a great question. It's a great question. I think the idea that more sex leads to better writing is very subjective. But I do think a healthy sex life is very important for physical and mental health.
Okay.
I'll leave it like that.
Okay,
also, I have to say, Bernardine Evaristo is such a legend, and fair play for her being honest and open like she was.
No, she's amazing. She's amazing. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading her book.
Yes.
So yeah, now that you've brought that up, can I just ask some of your favorite writers, some of your books the books that have influenced you, you know, some of the books that you read while writing 392, you know, just drop the names.
I think Stephen Kelman's Pigeon English, I was a big fan of. Robin Travis, who's published by Own It, his memoir, Prisoner to the Streets, I found so pacey and voice-driven and heartfelt. And yeah, so that was a big influence to me. Michael Doncour's Hold, the way he captures, there's a brilliant sort of scene when he's on a London bus. And yeah, there was the brilliant sort of diasporic voices coming through in sort of London environment was brilliant. Zadie Smith, of course. I love Zadie Smith, and she's writes
a legend.
Absolute legend, one of my favorite writers ever. And her novel NW in particular, I mean, I love them all, but NW in particular, because of its length and because what she's doing with words on the page, she messes around with white space a little bit on there, a little bit. Yeah, so Zadie Smith, big fan of. Who else? Just that, I mean, loads of, I think for the 392, it was all about sort of voice-driven, often first-person voices that really come through for me. But it changes with what I'm reading and what I'm writing quite regularly, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't mention The Lonely Londoners, because that was kind of like my segue from, once I read your book, then I was like looking for other books that are set in London. And I remember reading In Our Mad and Furious City and The Lonely Londoners. So those are also like really amazing.
Lonely Londoners, I mean, that's probably the number one source actually that helped me. It's one of my favorite novels. Sam Selwyn is an absolute genius. The way he captures that sort of first few footsteps into 1950s London, it's not what he was sold. It's bleak, it's dark, it's unfriendly, and it's freezing cold. So yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant novel. And Guy Gunaratne's, yes, it's so interesting because by the time In Our Mad and Furious City was just coming out, I think, or it just been longlisted for the Booker in 2018, I finished the 392 really.
Wow.
And then I read Guy's and I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, oh no. And he's such a lovely guy as well.
There is a question from James Murua. I mean, there is an article on The Guardian just recently. It's called "Where Are the Hotshot British Male Novelists?" And you're featured as one of them, but there's so few of them. And James is asking, would you know why there are so few Black male novelists in the UK?
It's not good enough. It's one thing I'm really, really passionate about. More Black British writers being picked up, being read. And I think there isn't a single factor why this is happening, but whatever it is, it needs to start and it needs to be fixed up right now. It can't be, we can't rely on indie presses to pick up voices. I was published by an indie press, but we need bigger names to get involved in taking a punt. But I don't even like the idea of taking a punt or the idea of taking a risk, because actually there are so many talented Black writers who are not necessarily risk worthy. They just haven't been given the opportunity, the same sort of budgets of marketing, the same sort of love, the same sort of editing thoroughness. I don't think there is a dearth of male Black novelists, especially in the UK. I just don't think they're given the opportunity. And I hope Articles, and I think that's just a small drop in the ocean, but I hope Articles is like the one that Nikesh wrote for The Guardian is a good point, is a good starting point, but a lot of work needs to be done. I think money is very important, but belief and love, and just, there isn't a dearth of talent. It's just they're not giving the same opportunity. So I really hope there's a turning point.
Yeah, do you think maybe it's the way the publishing industry is structured? And for example, you as someone who's already scaled that wall, or is already scaling that wall, do you think there's any advice you'd have for like a young writer based in the UK or a young Black British writer, especially the male writers, to just how do you think they can be able to overcome this?
Yeah, I think networking is going to be key, and it's obviously, there's like added cliche about like, oh, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And I do think if you can, try and get in touch with, my email is always open, for instance, so do ping me an email or anything. But if you know people who are even editorial assistants or fledgling writers or any sort of position within the sort of very archaic publishing pyramid, try and get in contact with them. Be a bit bold, be a bit confident, because at the moment the numbers aren't stacking up, and it's a real shame, because I've taught amazing writers, I've read amazing Black writers who aren't always given the same sort of limelight as their white counterparts. That sort of hashtag publishing paid me that was quite popular a few months ago. I was so shocked at just the disparity between Black and white writers, and how is that acceptable? There needs to be a massive change. And so I think networking is going to be key. Keep writing, keep striving, putting pressure on big publishers and the systems in place to actually open their eyes to what's going on. It shouldn't always be up to sort of indie presses taking, picking up what they say, voice-driven writing or Black writing. It shouldn't be the case at all.
Okay. There's a question here from Zukiswa, who is the curator of this festival. She's asking, what did publishing pay you, and can one be a full-time writer in the UK?
So I mean, I have to be quite careful, obviously, because my first one published with an indie press, and the second one is discussions are still going on and whatnot. So it'd be quite tricky to give you any sort of concrete figures. In relation to the second element of that question, which I think is a very valid question, I think we need to be open. If people want to sort of take writing seriously, they need to know if they can make a living off it. And I think that's very important. In my experience, I'm not quite there yet, obviously, but it takes a good few years before I can start thinking about that, before I can start thinking about living comfortably. But if you just put the grind in, put the effort in, I think everything is possible. And I'm always that incessant optimist that you can earn a living and earn a good living from writing. But it does take work and it does take years. and it does take all of those things that we talked about in the previous question about sort of networking and belief and getting in contact and putting your name out there. And you know, social media has its pitfalls, but actually, if you're trying to get your name out there at the beginning, at least, you know, there are some advantages to it as well.
Okay.
Don't make me say social media again.
I won't, but there's a question here from Remy. I'm sorry if I butcher this, but Dizzy Rascal or Stormzy?
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah,
okay.
Okay. That's a very good question. It's a very, very good question. For me, musically, Dizzy Rascal, growing up, was massive. Boy in the Corner. So I was 11 years old when Boy in the Corner came out, his first album. It was shortlisted for the Mercury Prize at the time. It was the best thing I've ever heard. It was the commentary of my teenage years. He was talking about things that I knew and I could relate to in a way that I could understand. So, and I think he carried that on for at least a couple more albums, and then it got a bit rubbish. But what Stormzy has done outside of music, and I love Stormzy's music, don't get me wrong, but you know, his publishing is, you know, Murky Books, which is fantastic. Derek Owusu's published with Murky Books. Jude Yawson, who published his biography of Stormzy and the team with Murky Books. So that's brilliant. He's done a lot with Oxford and Cambridge, you know, scholarships. So what Stormzy has done on sort of more of a political level is just amazing. And I have huge respect for him, because it's people like him and voices like his who can make a lot of difference. And I don't want to put pressure on you know, black names to always do that, because there can be this expectation of you having to do that all the time. And I feel and I think it's important, don't get me wrong, but Stormzy has sort of done it on his own accord from a very young age. He's pushed publishing, he's pushed the Black Lives Matter, you know what I mean? So big up Stormzy, definitely. Dizzy Rascal, back in the day, Dizzy Rascal musically was the one for me, but you know, that's just subjective opinion.
There's this really thirsty person who is asking to be handcuffed and locked up, but also they're asking, what is your
next
thought?
Level thirsty.
What is your thought on the sudden rise of second-person narratives all over? I think their name is Ndegwa.
That's a very good question, because I saw your tweet and I found that very interesting, because I do a bit of marking for the university that I am doing the PhD, and I do a little bit of marking for a fantastic sort of magazine called Smoke Long Quarterly, sort of flash fiction, and also just reading novels. You are right, there is a real growth and a real emergence of second person narratives, and the book I'm writing at the moment, you know,
No, please don't, please.
Okay, I won't say anything. But
I cannot stand it. I cannot stand second, like literally, every time I open a short story and it's in second person, I'm just like, no.
Okay, I won't say anything else then, but there is a real emergence. There's been a real growth about it. And do you know what? I'm not going to ridicule it, because I can't for obvious reasons, because I think if the reader has to work a little bit, that's fine. And I feel like with second person, you have to work quite a lot to get used to it, because it can be very jarring and annoying. And I really appreciate that. It's it's very distracting, isn't it? But I think you've just, as a reader, have just got to believe and trust in the writer that he or she know what they're doing. But it takes a while to get used to it. So it's a massive risk. So on that front, if you're trying it for the first time, I wouldn't do it. Try it.
I feel like when such risks are taken and there's a reward, then it's kind of like, okay, cool, you know, like, you know, Diaz does it in This Is How You Lose Her. And I was just this is brilliant. But then again, some of these, you read them and you're just like, this story could have perfectly worked in like third person, worked so well in third person, or worked so well in any other thing apart from second person.
Do you know what? I'm not a hater. I think the reason why I retweeted or liked your tweet is because I agreed with the sentiment of the fact there has been an emergence, not necessarily agreed with the view that it's always rubbish. Because I think you're right. But it is harder for a reader to get engrossed in a story that is in second person. And I think as a writer, you have to work harder. And harder doesn't necessarily mean skillful. So yeah, it is tricky, but yeah, there is emergence. Re-emergence. Yeah, it's kind of nuts.
All right. Moving away from that dreadful second person conversation, Leah is asking, where did you get your glasses from?
I think it's like buy one get one free in Specsavers, which is like the main chain of of glasses in England. But yeah, I quite like to change my glasses every year. I think just for a different look, and I also break them quite regularly.
How much is your book deal? Because most of us can't afford that.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm doing the PhD, so I get paid. I get funding to do the PhD. I've got 1 year left. Okay. But I treated myself to 2 pairs of new glasses when the first book came out because I thought I'd be doing interviews and stuff like that, and I thought, I need to see and I need to look okay. So yeah, but yeah, you could treat yourself to some glasses. Go for it. Yours look great, Troy. Don't worry about it.
Oh, thank you. There's a question here from Remy. What is your beard or skin care routine? I told you it's a mess down here. It's a mess.
My skincare routine is not too existent, I'll be honest. Beard routine, just a little shape up. I have a little clippers that I do myself. Beard comb, yeah, some oil, something. But it's not as strong as JJ Bowler. You know JJ Bowler, right?
Yeah.
His beard game is so
His beard game is
so strong. For about a year, right? I really wanted to be JJ Bowler, like same clothes, same hat, same
I think
beard.
we've all wanted to be JJ Bowler at some point. I got the beanies thing from him. I was like,
I respect that. He's an inspiration. He's an icon as a writer. Mask Off is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's a very sort of terse, pithy book about toxic masculinity. And obviously No Place to Call Home, which is published by the same publisher of the 392. Yeah, so as a writer, as a fashionista, he's just a sportsman as well. So big up JJ.
There's a question here from Emma. I don't know if it's directed to you because have you been to Nairobi before?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Okay, because she's asking Norwich versus Nairobi. As someone who has been to both, Nairobi wins any day. Norwich is just so cold and strange, man. Like, nah.
Yeah. Do you think Norwich? I always have this conversation with people, writers, because obviously Norwich has the UEA, which is famous for creative writing, obviously. Did it influence your writing? Did the place as a locality, did it influence your writing, Norwich, do you think, for the better?
I think just having time to write and also not having anything else to do because Norwich is dead, literally. Like 8 p.m. the whole city is shut down. There's no clubbing. There's no, let's go hang out at this place. You're in your room by 8 p.m. I think that enabled me to write more. But apart from that, I would be sad if Norwich seeped into my writing because it's so slow for me. Like I love UEA, it's an amazing space and you get to meet amazing writers, but then Norwich as a city didn't do it for me.
That's really interesting. I'll be honest, I love it, I think, because growing up in London, it was all hustle and bustle, and I think I really appreciate the peace and quiet to write in Norwich. I don't similar to you, I don't think it's seeped into my writing in particular, but yeah, I do think because it's so quiet and it's still only 2 hours away from London. I think it's a good sort of conducive space for me, actually.
All right. There's a question here from James. What do you think of when you think of Tottenham?
I think I know where that question's going.
I have no idea where it's going, but
I think it's a football chant.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, basically, the football chant goes, "What do you think of Tottenham? Shit. What do you think of shit, Tottenham?" And then they start chanting. But I'm a Manchester United fan, so this, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying anything.
Okay. I'm trying to find any relevant questions because everyone is asking really terrible questions here.
Wow.
Guys, please send us the good questions. Ask him about his book. Ask him where you can get his book. definitely it's available on Kindle. You know, you can get it from Amazon. Or do you prefer them to get it from any site specifically?
No, absolutely no preference. Absolutely no preference. I mean, if you're after sort of a sort of quickish read, very voice driven, all over a very condensed time of just 36 minutes, yeah, go for it. But yeah, no, there's definitely no pressure to get it from any particular place. There's no pressure to get it at all. You know, it's just
There is definitely pressure to get it because I want everyone here to read it.
But yeah, read it.
Yeah, beyond the UK and Kindle, where can we get your book in the world?
Yeah, my publisher, Own It, they do free international shipping. So if you go to Google, type in Own It Publishing, I think they're probably the first hit. They do free international shipping. And obviously all the money goes straight to them, which is better than Amazon, which I don't know the specific figures, but I know they take a massive cut.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Trying to find something else. Guys, please stop embarrassing me like this. They're just talking about JJ Bola. This is how he has eclipsed our conversation.
To be honest,
Isaac is asking. Isaac is asking, what's the best way to get a signed copy?
Could probably make that work via the publisher somehow.
Okay.
It's a bit tricky because of the coronavirus to try and get to London and sign copies, but yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Get in contact with the publisher via the way I said before, and yeah.
Okay. There's a question here from Remy. Are you trying to be a budget Lacazette? I think I'm not sure. Since you couldn't be a JJ Bola.
Like I said, I'm not a massive Arsenal fan. Well done for them winning the FA Cup yesterday. That was a good win for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm not trying to be no budget Lacazette. Even though he's a great footballer, should score more goals. I think there's too much reliance on Aubameyang at the moment. But yeah, I think now JJ's the hero. Lacazette is a bit lower down the pecking order, I think.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. Lay just say JJ is a bit of a sex symbol. Like, what is this tussle that's going on here?
Look what you started. I think we started something here.
No. Dr. Ndlovu is asking, what's your thesis about? I think now she's just asking that to pretend to be a doctor.
My thesis is about, it's about, I'm very fascinated about the Black male experience and the Black British male experience. So my thesis is about the depiction of Black men and Black footballers and Black sportsmen in particular in literature, mainly conveyed in their autobiographies. So I read a lot of football autobiographies and secondary text, and think about how, because often whenever people write about Black men in sport, it's written by a white journalist, so someone who didn't play the game, and someone who doesn't really know how to write about the Black experience in a sort of very full and proper way, because it's all very sort of generalized. So my PhD topic is looking at the problematic depiction of Black footballers and how they're depicted by white journalists, and that discrepancy, because it's very uncomfortable reading sometimes. When you read an autobiography, they always rely on the same tropes of, oh yes, I grew up in a council estate, oh yes, I had a very bad upbringing, and it's all very superficial. So my PhD scrutinizes the linguistics of it, but also structural, the structural makeup of football autobiographies when writing about Black sportsmen. And that ties nicely in with my second novel, which is similar themes.
Okay. There's a question here. Which is your favorite part of the 392 to read aloud? But before you answer that, Ndegwa is shouting at me and I don't like it. He's asking, do you watch Insecure? So he can send in a follow-up question. But yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure what that is actually. Is it a TV series or something?
I think so. So.
Okay. No, I'm afraid I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
What was the question again? Sorry?
What's your favorite part of the 392 to read aloud?
Yeah, I think, like I was saying before, there are a few characters in there that I just really enjoyed writing. The character of Natalie and Boxer in particular, really, I had such a sort of cathartic experience writing those voices. And for that very reason, I quite like the way they are voiced on the page. They're pacey, poetic in places. So I really enjoy reading Natalie's first chapter. For me, it captures and it epitomizes all of the sort of key thematic ideas about why I was trying to write the 392, the fit, you know, the idea of gentrification, the fear of terrorism, the fact that Black people and people of color are always othered in some way. And that's all covered really in the first chapter, so to give you sort of flavor of the rest of the book. So yeah, Natalie, and also Box is quite fun. You know, I'm a big fan of sort of grime music, like we talked about before with Dizzy Rascal and Stormzy, and I was inspired by that in writing Box's chapters in particular. So that sort of particular vernacular and dialect hopefully really comes through. So yeah, probably Natalie and Box's chapters.
All right. There's a question here from Mohale, who is one of the best writers on the African continent. She's asking, how have you changed as a writer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've learned so much more about the actual craft in the last sort of two years since I finished writing the 392 and it being published. I'm a lot more particular about the crafting of sentences, how words and sentences look on the page, and how they should sound, and how one can manipulate the language to really have the best effects for the reader. I like my writing to be really pacey and poetic and have a particular lilting cadence to it. And I've been reading a lot more and had a lot more time to really work on the syntactical structure of sentences to form the overall story. So yeah, I've learned a lot linguistically, but also I would say on a sort of wider basis about the actual process of getting work published, and how long it takes, who the right people are, and yeah, it's all been very beneficial, very conducive, I think, moving ahead. I've learned a lot about the sort of inner workings of the publishing world, the importance of having author quotes and cover design, getting it typeset by the right people in the right time, events to say yes to, events to say no to. So I've learned a lot.
All right. Zukiswa is asking, does studying creative writing in uni make one a better writer?
I want to say no, and I do genuinely believe no. It was very expensive to do I did a master's in creative writing first, and then I'm doing the PhD. And you know, there's not a single sort of thing that a creative writing tutor is going to teach you about the craft necessarily. It's more of a wider thing, which makes it more successful and conducive. It's talking to peers, it's having your work workshopped by other people who love writing, it's going to the pub and talking about books, it's going to events and author events. I think, you know, you can have a similar university experience by going online and signing up to some online courses which are far cheaper, but I absolutely loved my experience studying creative writing at university, and I don't regret any of it, even though it was quite costly at times, just because it's allowed me to be taken seriously, I think, and also keeps my parents happy because you know, I've got a master's degree and they get to go to a graduation ceremony and drink free wine. So, you know, for me, it doesn't have to be university to be a good creative writer. And obviously there's loads of successful authors who didn't do a master's or a PhD in creative writing, but on a subjective, personal level, I've loved every moment.
All right, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to find... James says you should put the novel Don't Die on Wednesday by Michael Afenfia on your reading list. I'll text you that later.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's really helpful. Nice one. Have a good I'll read that.
Yeah, Leah is asking, worst and best question you've ever been asked as a writer, I suppose.
It's probably one, I can't remember when it was. It was one about my skincare routine and my beard routine. That's probably my highlight.
Remy, Okay, wait, is that the best or the worst?
No, oh, I'll leave that to you to decide. No, I'm joking. I had one at the paperback launch, which you came to back in February, and it was from Alex, who's a podcaster. Alex Holmes is a very good podcast, and it was about, you know, your best experience on a London bus or any bus. And it's really weird because the book had been out for about a year then, and I'd never been asked that question, so that was a good question. But I'm not sure where it pales in comparison with the skincare and beard routine question, but yeah.
So I think just 4 minutes to go. Thoughts on coming up with COVID-19 related narratives, and just to tie it in with how has COVID-19 affected your imagination?
Yeah, it's good. I think that's a good question. I think it can work both ways. You know, I found the very beginning of the outbreak very tough because I was obviously really worried about friends and family, and it was quite hard to try and focus on writing at that time. Then after a while, once I got into a routine of being at home a lot more than I usually am, and not doing events and not going out, not going to university, etc., I got myself into a routine where I enjoyed writing again. And I would say, if it wasn't for you know, the horror of the crisis, I don't think I would have finished my second novel when I did. So I finished it during the crisis. So it's been obviously, it's been horrific, but you know, on a personal level, I'm relieved that I managed to find that spark of creativity and imagination eventually, because it did take a few weeks, because I was generally quite scared, to be honest, to finish the novel. And was my writing inspired by it? Obviously, it was too late for it to be inspired by it. I was coming towards the end of the first draft. But I've been reading a few short stories that have obviously been inspired by the COVID crisis. And I think that, you know, I mean, there's a reason why there are poet laureates out there writing about specific events. So I do think there is a place for COVID-related write short stories and novels and writing whatever. But you know, don't go overboard, I would say, just yet. I think let it sink in for people, and then we can probably write back in hindsight.
All right. I think that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, I really appreciate you coming to talk to us and, you know, reading from your book. Everyone, please, you can get the book on Kindle. I don't think Prestige have copies, but for every other book which has been featured in the festival, you can get it at Prestige in Nairobi. Ashley, try and get us your books to Prestige Bookstore in Nairobi. Thank you so much. I think that's about it.
Thank you so much, Troy. Thanks for having me, and keep up the great work with the magazine and stuff. It looks really great. So all the best. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.